Conditions May Apply by CinnamonPinecones. Read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 37. Chris, is that a weed? I'm calling the police! As spring was coming to an end, Ivy and Eraser had been splitting up more and more drug deals by the day. They were all small-time deals to individuals rather than large transfers to other sellers, but their increased frequency was troubling regardless, and Ivy didn't like it one bit. This was only going to become a bigger problem if they left it. They needed to find the source and snuff it out, and they needed to do it quickly. All the people they'd caught selling were locals, so Ivy figured the source was also local, and that was not going to fly, not on their watch. They'd yet to see anything in Uptown, but, despite living there, they hadn't been keeping as close of a watch on the warehouse district. There was generally not much traffic around there, and Ivy figured they would be more useful where there were more people, to be in trouble in the business and residential areas. They couldn't just abandon the more populated areas for Kami knows how long to wander around aimlessly trying to find something in the warehouse district. They were already taking one night off each week. Leaving Uptown to its own devices for any longer than that didn't sit right with them, so they decided to dedicate the next weekend to recon. Generally, they spent that time sleeping or sifting for scrappable parts at Dagobah for pocket change, but they could skip a weekend for this. This was far more important. For the rest of the week, they used any of the downtime they had at school to draw out a map and plan the most efficient route. They wanted to cover as much ground as possible several times over in case activity changed throughout the day. By the time Saturday rolled around, they had a route that would cover the entire warehouse district that they could complete in just under 4 hours, meaning they could run through it twice in one day while still getting a good amount of sleep and patrolling at night like they usually did. If they found anything of note, they would centralize Sunday's route around those areas. If not, they would repeat the process again. All right, this was going to be exhausting. There were fewer people to hide from, but there were also fewer places to hide, both in the differing landscape and in the light of day, so it was a unique challenge. Maybe they should do this more often to keep their skills sharp. The few homeless camps that they knew of were around and still going strong, and, unfortunately, the local gang still had their stronghold over on Block 8. They probably held some sort of squatters' rights at this point, and there were far too many of them for Ivy to do anything about it, and it taunted him daily. They'd been keeping an eye on that area, but nothing had changed, and they doubted they'd be dumb enough to turn their headquarters into a drug farm anyway, so they moved on quickly. They were about 2.5 hours into their first sweep when they stumbled across an absolutely noxious smell. It coated their sinuses and made them want to spew immediately. It was like rotten eggs on steroids, and it appeared to be coming from one of the many abandoned buildings to the west. There was smoke rising from somewhere on the roof, and beyond that, there were clear signs that people had been coming and going. There were muddy tire tracks and footprints going in and out of 2 different doors. It's like they weren't even trying to hide. Kami, this place is so under-policed, it's not even funny. They continued on the rest of their route just to make sure they didn't miss anything, then spent the rest of the day watching for anyone coming or leaving. There was a car parked there when they first arrived, and another one had replaced it when they got back, so they made sure to note the make, model, and license plates. The more information they could get, the better. Maybe they could get Eraser's advice later tonight. Ivy had been acting weird, or at least weirder than normal. They seemed agitated, and the route they were leading him on was one they'd never taken before. They were skirting along the outer edge of the residential district and toward the graveyard of decrepit warehouses. It seemed completely derelict, but Ivy was walking with a purpose, so he decided not to question it. After 12 minutes of walking along street level, Ivy led them toward a disused and repurposed warehouse that had a very distinct smell coming from it. It smelled of ammonia and rotten eggs mixed with something sweet, and there was steam rising from the roof. Ivy silently jerked their head in its direction with an eyebrow raised. Were they asking what he thought of it? Shota had participated in enough drug busts to know what was going on in there. It's clearly a meth lab, either a very large or extremely poorly insulated one, given that I can smell it from here, he responded quietly with a grimace. Damn it. That's what I thought. I knew it had to be coming from in the city, Ivy said, looking very frustrated. What do you want to do about it? Shota asked. Ivy's frustration turned to exasperation as they looked at him. Oh, I was thinking of baking some cookies to welcome them to the neighborhood. What do you think, chocolate chip or snickerdoodles? They shot back in an overly cheery tone. Their eyes scrunched up as if they were wearing a shit-eating grin beneath their mask, but they quickly fell back to the irritation they held before. There are too many potential exits for me to cover alone, or even the two of us. If we go in there, there's no way we catch them all, and they'll just set up shop again in a new location. Do you think Suka could send some people in if you pushed for it? They asked, sounding a bit uncertain. This was another test, wasn't it? They wanted to know if he was willing to put his name and backing behind Uptown on a more official level. These guys couldn't be more obvious if they tried. The smell alone was enough evidence to round up enough officers for a raid, but that, in conjunction with increased reports of meth dealings in local streets, definitely sealed the deal. It felt wrong to gain Ivy's trust like this, but it was very low risk and high reward for him. There was practically no way for Ivy to know that there was no risk in this for him, but regardless, he thought it better to be honest. Yes, the smell alone is enough to warrant feet on the ground. The cops will come if they're called, and I can easily call a raid on this. He replied, Oh, thank me. I did some recon, and I've got information. There's a few names and some plates I saw around here earlier, but I want to keep an eye out for a little bit longer, so we can catch as many of them as he cut them off. You were out earlier? He asked. Ivy gave him a look for the interruption, but answered regardless. Yes, I didn't want to waste patrol time looking if there was nothing to find. I thought you agreed not to patrol without me, Ivy, he chastised. I wasn't patrolling. I was just walking around, they defended. You just said you were doing recon, kid. What is recon if not just walking around with purpose? They shot back without even looking away from the warehouse in front of them. This kid was going to be responsible for him going gray before 30. There's a difference between taking a walk and poking around a meth lab, Ivy, he said as he pinched the bridge of his nose between his thumb and forefinger. Ivy continued without paying him any mind. I live here. I'm not allowed to walk around. Who's to say I didn't just stumble on this? You, Ivy, you're to say that. You literally just said you were doing recon. Semantics. You can't prove anything, they dismissed with a wave of their hand. I'm going to kick your ass, he muttered under his breath. You already do that. Get a better threat, they quipped back as they stood to turn back to their patrol route. Once they were back on the rooftops and well out of earshot of the warehouse, he spoke up. You're not doing recon on a meth lab alone, Ivy. When are you planning on going? I can clear my schedule. Ivy shot back a glare before responding, Tomorrow. All day up until patrol, they said tauntingly. Well, that certainly wasn't ideal, but he knew Ivy would go out regardless of whether he was there or not, so he had to be there. He was going to have a lazy day with Zashi. They weren't going to be happy about this. All right, I'll meet you on the northeast corner of Block 16 at what? 7 a.m.? He asked. Ivy narrowed their eyes at him before responding, 6 a.m. Crap, he muttered under his breath. That's only 5 hours from now. Ivy just looked at them with a smug expression and crossed their arms. Fine, but we're calling it early tonight, and we're taking meal breaks. He relented before adding, and we're not going out Monday. Ivy's eyes went wide at that. Say that louder, why don't you? Damn, okay, they replied as they looked around for anyone who might have overheard. He let them, even though he knew no one was around. He wouldn't have said that without checking. All right, northeast corner of Block 16, 6 a.m. Sound good? He asked to confirm. Ivy gave him another look for broadcasting their plans again, but nodded anyway. I don't need a babysitter, but yeah, sure, if it makes you feel better, they added. Okay, go get some sleep. Kami knows we'll need it, he said as he rubbed his eyes. This kid was trying to kill him, he was sure of it. Whatever, old man. You already look like you live off of 3 hours of sleep and a caffeine addiction. Quit whining. They shot back before they turned and jumped off the roof without another word. Either this kid was going to kill him or he was going to kill this kid. Right now, both options were equally tempting. Great. They just signed up to be around a racer for nearly a full 24 hours straight. Keeping up the Ivy persona was exhausting enough on their 6 to 8 hour patrols. How the hell were they going to manage this? Well, on the bright side, he didn't need to wash off the eyeshadow tonight. He didn't even need to change. He could just go home and collapse into his nest until his alarm went off. Yeah, that sounded like a good plan. He was tired just thinking about tomorrow. Stupid eraser head and his stupid mother hen ass behavior. End of chapter.